comments on an interview Richard Dawkins gave. It's part of the TED podcast series. Links in the show notes. And I think they got it totally wrong. First, they say evolutionary aspects of language, and then all they talk about is speech. And that would be the first thing I want to criticize here, is that language has been around way before speech. Speech is just a sub form of language. Language can happen, there's sign language, there's chemical language, like trees, they communicate with each other. So I'm a bit surprised that both these people, I mean, Dawkins and the interviewer, which seem very knowledgeable about linguistics and things like that, don't acknowledge this. But the more important criticism I have is they talk about poetry as some sort of, I don't know, aberration of evolution because it's like too much and it's useless and I see it as the exact opposite, actually. I think doing the more research I do on AI and intelligence per se, I realize that poetry actually is a form of intelligence, and it is probably the most accurate form of intelligence, or in other words, the most intelligent form of intelligence. And I'm gonna unpack that a little bit. So I'm going back to Marcus Hütter's definition of intelligence, which is in papers in the show notes. What Hutter does, and I think that's why he's probably the most underrated AI research scientist right now, he quantifies intelligence. And why is that important? For two reasons. One is we can actually talk about something once we can quantify it. Otherwise, it's empty words. But more importantly, also, we can improve it. Because once we quantify something, we can get better at it. We get more of it. Or we can do research and understand, okay, we have less if we do this and more if we do that. So intelligence is quantifiable. And Elon Musk recently made a comment that with a 10x improve of compute, we can double intelligence. Now, this comment makes a lot of sense in a Marcus Hütter type context, where we can actually quantify both of these metrics, compute and intelligence, and then maybe we can find out some sort of AI Moore law type relationship. Excuse me. But back to poetry. Now, in Marcus Hütter's intelligence definition, intelligence is inversely related to Kolmogorov complexity, which is, in simple words, the amount of information or the amount of strings you need, the amount of letters or zeros and ones you need to express something. Like the less, the better. So if I have two programs, zeros and ones, that both define a Fibonacci series, for example, and one is shorter than the other, then the shorter one is more intelligent. So in that way, we can now plug that into Musk's definition of intelligence. So the more compute we have, the better our models get into finding shorter versions of definitions of the representations of the Fibonacci rule. Now, what does it have to do with poetry? Well, isn't poetry the same idea, right? If we take another example from science, which is Occam's razor, which has something from the 13th century, some monk Occam said something along the lines that if I can express a concept with less words, then that is better than if I need more words. So isn't that exactly what poetry is? So how do I express, for example, I just did a review of Ralph Waldo Emerson's biography, and Emerson is a fantastic poet because he's able to put very complex, difficult concepts into simple words, and that's what poetry is. Now, why is that evolutionarily advantageous? Well, I guess you could argue that mates, let's say if a man is good at poetry, women would want to mate with him because it's a signal of intelligence, the same way beauty is a signal of intelligence. Beauty, good looks, or something we consider good looking, you could look at Occam's razor, right? There's more symmetry in somebody. We like symmetry, so you need less information to depict Paul Newman than the Hunchback of Notre Dame, because the Hunchback of Notre Dame is very deformed and therefore needs a lot of information to be described. Versus Newman, you can kind of say, nice brown hair and symmetric face and nice smile and good teeth and a couple more things, and that's it. Now, I understand this is maybe far-fetched, but I think there is some truth to it. So again, I think poetry is the exact opposite of some Darwinian aberration. It is very Darwinian in the sense that poetry is the highest sign of human intelligence if we assume that speech is a very human form of language, and language being a very important part of intelligence, not the only one, but very important. And therefore, the highest form of human intelligence is poetry. And if you're a good poet, you get to reproduce with women or men, if you're a woman poet, and therefore you get to have more kids and things like that. So from that perspective, it's evolutionary. I would really strongly suggest anybody who has an inclination to understand intelligence to think about it from the perspective of poetry. And I actually have, and this is now a tangent, but I have a feeling that a reinforcement learning agent of the near future will have a reward function that is actually optimizing for poetry. And if you build an RL agent through self-play in an AlphaGo Zero type way that optimizes for something along the lines of poetry, I think you will get a very, very intelligent, at least very intelligent verbal machine, if not even a machine that can also function in the real world. Thank you.